My company-issue security cruiser trundled along the ice-coated road as I made my way to the suspect's home. Named for its long, harsh winters, the planet Persephone was far from perfect by colonist standards. With chilly summers and downright freezing winters, Persephone certainly wouldn't be picked as a resort world anytime soon. Apparently, however, its natural abundance of cobalt and other metals was enough to convince Prism, a cell phone company, to cough up the cash for a colony. Of course, as far as colonizing other planets went, there was only one name in the game. Whether it be a company or country making the call, Neverland Colonial Technologies was always on the other end. Everything a client could want from a colony, the company would provide. Prefabricated buildings, infrastructure, and even colony policing. That was where I came in. Status report on our alleged dealer? Officer Smith asked through my radio right as I came to a stop in front of the apartment building, 3 blocks from where our guy gave some poor kid the dose he'd end up dying from. Pulling up now, I sighed, putting the car in park and stepping out into the snow. My job as a colonial security officer was pretty much the same as that of a cop back on Earth. Keep the peace, enforce the law, protect the community. Most of the time what that meant was standing outside of public spaces to discourage the local punks from trying anything funny. Stepping into the apartment lobby and making my way upstairs to the 3rd floor, I kindly waved tenants back into their apartments with my right hand as they peered out to see me passing by, all the while keeping my left firmly at my side for quick access to my service weapon should the need to use it arise. Stalking up to the suspect's door and rapping my knuckles firmly against it, I spoke with volume just short of a shout. "Mr. Johan. This is Officer Ambrose, NCT Security. Open up." No response. Inside the suspect's apartment, I could just barely make out the sound of footsteps pacing past the door. After at least 10 seconds had passed without a word from the suspect, I once again knocked on the door and announced myself. "NCT Security. I'm here on a warrant issued by Persephone's Global Charter Legal Counsel. Open this damn door!" Silence. Neverland Colonial Technologies took great pains to ensure that its policies were in compliance with global charter legislation. Unlike the toothless United Nations that preceded it, the Global Charter had all the power it needed to enforce its rules, something a certain now bankrupt tech giant found out the hard way when it was discovered that they were practicing slavery on one of their colony worlds. Among the policies and procedures from their policing accord adopted by NCT was the 3-knock rule, which stated that when carrying out a warranted search, officers were obligated to knock 3 times, with at least a 10-second interval between each one. This rule could be waived if there was sufficient reason to believe someone's life was in immediate danger, but for drug busts like this, it was pretty set in stone. Raising my right knuckle to the door for a 3rd time, I raised my voice to supply one final warning. "You have 10 seconds before I kick this door down. Unless you want to pay to replace the frame, I'd recommend you make this easy on both of us and let me in." Inside the apartment, I could vaguely hear the sound of a toilet attempting to flush, followed by water hitting the tile floor as it overflowed. 3, 2, 1, I murmured to myself before reeling back my boot and slamming it hard into Eddie Johan's front door, forcing it open with the sound of splintering wood to reveal behind it the suspect's filthy, disorganized living quarters. Standing there on the left side of the room, I saw Eddie drenched in sweat, wearing slippers soaked in toilet water. "Hands where I can see 'em," I demanded, drawing my rail pistol and lining up the barrel with his chest. "Officer Ambrose," began Eddie with a clearly forced smile as he reluctantly complied with my demand. What brings you here?" He chuckled, refusing to get within 2 meters of me as he shuffled back toward the bathroom entrance and positioned himself in front of it. "Don't play dumb with me," I growled, gesturing with my gun for him to step aside. "You know exactly why I'm here." "You really don't want to go in there," pleaded the suspect as I lowered my weapon and stepped past him to investigate what he was trying to flush. As expected, what I found lodged within was a plastic bag full of white powder. Turning back toward the suspect and regarding him with a glare, I asked, "Just how stupid do you think I am? You want the honest answer to that?" He snarked, quickly bringing my blood to a boil with his sheer nonchalance. You think this is funny? I barked, grabbing Eddie by the shirt and pinning his back against the wall behind him. A mother buried her son yesterday because of you. Hell, if it were up to me, I'd put a bullet in your skull and call it frontier justice. Eddie's face hardened into a scowl as he fruitlessly labored to pry my hand off of him. You can cut with the whole Boy Scout act, he hissed, finally managing to free himself from my grip. You're not even a real cop, just another NCT corporate bootlicker playing dress-up. Well, you're halfway right, I replied with a sigh, holstering my weapon so as to free up both of my hands before wrestling him to the ground. I might not technically be a cop, but I'm no bootlicker, I continued, clapping on the handcuffs before leaning in to talk directly into his ear. I am the boot. Shepherding our guy down the apartment stairs and out into my cruiser's back seat separated from the front by steel mesh, I popped a cigarette into my mouth and stepped into the driver's seat. Those things'll kill ya, officer, Eddie quipped, rapidly regaining his usual shit-eating grin. What part of right to remain silent, don't you understand? I snapped back, reminding the suspect of what I'd told him on our way down. This being your fourth arrest, I thought you'd have it memorized by now. Driving through the colony's grid like streets set between dreary prefab buildings, I grabbed my radio and contacted the security station. This is Officer Ambrose. I'm bringing in the suspect now. ATA is 5 minutes. So what is it that brought you to this shithole? Asked Eddie from the back seat, staring out the cruiser window at Persephone's snow-covered landscape. Other than the perfect swimsuit weather, that is. I was top of my class with a gun, but apparently a C on the written test only gets you so far, I replied with a shrug, not caring about the scumbag's opinion of me enough to lie. A little better on the NCT security officer exam, and I probably would have been stationed on a resort world somewhere, sipping on margaritas after every shift. Besides, I murmured beneath my breath, where else can a convicted felon make this kind of salary? Neverland Colonial Technologies was the biggest employer of ex-cons there was, a fact they frequently flaunted as proof of their commitment to rehabilitations. The actual reason was much less glamorous. Felons had innately fewer options for gainful employment, so they were far less likely to risk unionizing, since my only crime that they could actually pin on me was tax fraud. I was allowed to become a security officer for the company. As for what they couldn't pin on me, let's just say there's a reason I'm so damn good with a gun. Pulling up to headquarters and parking in my cruiser's reserved space just outside the front door, I grabbed Eddie from the back seat and herded him into the lobby, where Sheriff Doe was waiting to receive him. Good work, Rowan, Doe remarked, ignoring Johan's inane chatter as he signaled for Officers Gale and Jovi to take the guy away. By the way, Anita and Jen from the bakery sent us some donuts. They're in the break room if you want to go ahead and help yourself. You know what? I think I just might, I shrugged before making my way down the hall towards our lounge. Stepping into the break room, I was immediately greeted by the twin scents of fresh coffee and warm glaze. Just as the sheriff promised, 3 half-full boxes of donuts were lined up beside the coffee pot. Grabbing one of the pastries and popping a hot chocolate pod into the coffee machine, I'm not a coffee guy. I approached a 2-person table halfway occupied by our forensics girl, Destiny, whose eyes were firmly glued to the television screen as yet another news report droned on about the disappearance of the Virgo cluster. You'd think after a month they'd find something else to talk about, I shrugged, removing the now stumpy cigarette from my mouth and putting it out on the ashtray before taking a bite of my donut. I'll admit, it was pretty fun at first watching the eggheads squirm. But that source of entertainment lost its luster after about a week of non-stop coverage. From the way they talked about it, you'd swear the world was about to end. Are you kidding? Destiny asked, not even turning to face me. The disappearance of the Virgo cluster defies everything we know about how the universe works. On screen, some sweaty scientist with bags under his eyes continued to rattle off the Egghead Collective's newest theory. Gravitational readings are consistent with the cluster's presence, implying that its mass is still there. What we could be looking at is a localized Big Crunch event. Naturally, I had absolutely no clue what that meant. Big Crunch just sounded to me like the name of an off-brand candy bar. It's the opposite of a Big Bang, Destiny clarified, evidently knowing me well enough to understand the limits of my knowledge. An entire cluster of galaxies condensed into a single point of infinite density. And what could possibly do something like that? I asked, more intrigued by this theory than the last three due to its sheer absurdity. Silence fell between us as Destiny continued staring into the screen. When finally she spoke, her tone carried with it a foreboding chill. Absolutely nothing, she began before taking a long sip of her coffee. As far as our current models of physics go, it should be impossible. Crossing the room to retrieve my drink, I returned to my seat only to find the previous broadcast replaced by meaningless static. What the hell? I growled, standing up once more to investigate the television for loose cables. My search, however, was quickly interrupted when Sheriff Doe's voice crackled through my radio. Interstellar communications just went offline, he broadcast through our radio network's open channel, ensuring that his message would be received by every officer on duty. Probably that damn receiver dish again, sighed Officer Smith, his words over the radio echoed by his real voice in the next room over. That snowstorm last night was pretty intense. Maybe it knocked something loose. Strange as it was for our communication line with the rest of humanity to be cut off so suddenly, I quickly categorized the event as not my problem, and prepared to move on with my evening. However, before I could even finish my drink in the break room, I was approached by Officer Smith. What is it? I asked him, preparing myself mentally for whatever random task I had been unwittingly volunteered for. The satellite techs are requesting an officer escort, he told me. It's getting dark out, and the Wenders hunt at night. They said they won't fix it without someone to back them up, and I know how much you love community outreach, so I volunteered to do your job while you go help them. Joy! I sighed, standing up and cracking my back before approaching the front door without so much as another word to the other officers. As expected, the technician's truck was waiting outside for me. Thank you, officer, the younger of the technicians smiled, stepping out of the passenger side and allowing me to assume his seat. Normally, we don't repair the dish after dark, but the sheriff insisted that he did. The older technician growled, pulling out of the parking lot and beginning the 20-minute drive out to where the dish was. And there's not a damn chance I'm going out without someone to watch my back. I came face to face alone with the local wildlife once, and once was once too many. Don't gotta tell me twice, I shrugged, lighting up once again before holding the cigarette between my fingertips. Wenders were the local apex predator, so named for their uncanny resemblance to a creature from Algonquin folklore. Their heads looked like those of deer, but with the unnerving additions of forward-facing eyes and razor-sharp teeth. From the neck down, they looked like freakishly tall chimps, averaging at around 7 or 8 feet tall. Terrifying as the bastards look, though they're not malevolent spirits, just opportunistic carnivores looking for their next meal. Usually a warning shot is enough to scare them away. If not, my rail pistol's got the stopping power to put one down. Gravel and snow crunched beneath the maintenance truck's tires as we trundled beyond the city limits to where the main dish was about 10 miles out. Why the hell did the company feel the need to build this thing so far from the city? I asked the techs more out of frustration than genuine curiosity. Do we look like civil engineers to you? The younger tech asked rhetorically, answering my question with a question of his own. We just make sure it works like it's supposed to. Speaking of, any idea what might be broken? I asked. For the next minute or so, I stared blankly ahead as the two techs debated their theories. The younger insisted that the issue was probably a misalignment of the dish caused by snow heaped onto it, while the senior technician posited a transmitter malfunction as the reason behind it. Suddenly, my radio roared to life as the sheriff's voice rang through it. Sheriff Doe speaking. Orbital defenses have been taken offline. Something is in our airspace. I repeat, something is in our airspace. The hell? I murmured, pressing down on my radio's transmission button before speaking into it. This is Officer Ambrose. Can you ID the hostiles? Radar says there's 30 of them right above us. They aren't responding to any hails. For the next few minutes as we continued our drive out to the receiver dish, the line was alive with chatter. Every security officer on Persephone wanted to know what was going on and what should be done about it. Pirates were a rare occurrence even on the outskirts of human expansion, and they usually broadcast demands before even entering orbit. Pulling up to the communications array and stepping out alongside the two techs, I was just about to press down on the radio's transmitter button when the dissonant voices coming from it fell silent, replaced by static all at once as though someone had flipped a switch. "This is Officer Ambrose. Can anyone hear me?" I shouted into the radio, desperate for some kind of response. Then, through the device's crackling static, something spoke up. "Nos, painite." Looking behind us back toward the colony, I watched as a blinding blue light shone from the night sky, illuminating the darkness like lightning to reveal a fleet of strangely shaped ships, with the light itself originating from the largest and octagonal vessel at least a mile wide. I barely saw the lance of light touch down. It flashed for a fraction of a second, and yet even miles away I felt a slight surge of warmth as it carved into the center of town, right where our headquarters was. "You two!" I shouted to the pair of now motionless techs, both of whom now stared at the sky in horror. "Go inside, seal the doors, and try to send a distress signal to the global charter." Reaching into my pocket and producing a high-power taser, I tossed it to the younger of the two. "In case of uninvited guests," I said before snatching the truck keys from the other guy's hand and climbing into the driver's seat, burning rubber on my way back to the colony.